So we're in still the first year of a new generation of consoles. We're about like what 6 months in now. We are seeing already a lot of games that are coming out in kind of like a weird shape. Like they don't seem like they're pushing the hardware of say the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X as good as it could. And honestly, a large portion of that is just quite frankly the fact that a lot of games that are being made for these consoles are still being made for the prior generation. Whether that's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Horizon 2, God of War Ragnarok, I believe, might be falling into that category. I don't know if Xbox really has this problem because their library has not really had a lot of exclusive titles on the new console yet. So, but I mean, like every third-party game that you know of that's getting released, like Watch Dogs Legion and other stuff like that, like they're all getting popped onto these current and prior gen consoles. And still, yeah, there is definitely some improvements on a lot of them. Obviously, the 60 frames per second thing is becoming a big deal on a lot of things. You are getting 4K textures on a lot of these games, but realistically, you're not getting remotely near the full potential. And once we start seeing exclusive titles for these consoles, then we'll really get a better idea. And to make that case in point, we had one of the developers from Control basically saying what we all kind of knew, in that it sucks. Like, it sucks doing both. And without, like, going too deep into the article, but, like, this is really the only one that really, really makes a difference here. So, whenever you're in this cross-generational point, to be blunt, it sucks. You have to support the previous gen, make sure that sings, and then whatever you bring to next gen is still limited by the choices you made years ago for the previous generation. It's not a very realistic thing that this old game, we're just going to remake everything and then bring it to next gen. It's just not like that. It's not a reality for us because you're literally taking away resources that are building the future games and improving the engine for the future. Reality is that it's not as simple as just, oh, you take this game that you made on the PS5 and then you lower the settings down for PS4. It really isn't that simple because you have to build resources that work on each platform. So I think that there's really nothing we can do about it because the reality is, especially now here in this pandemic, that not a lot of people are being able to get a PS5 or an Xbox Series X because the quantity is limited. And of course, scalpers. But there's just not enough people to viably make a single game for PS5 or Xbox Series X right now. It might be towards the end of this year or certainly next year, but I think there's a reason why Sony decided that Spider-Man Miles Morales was going to be on PS4 as well, and now Horizon 2, I believe, is going to be on PS4 as well. And there are probably other games that they've said this for that I'm just forgetting at the moment. But there's a reality why they're doing this, and that's because there just isn't enough of a customer base right now to justify doing one over the other. It makes sense that because so many people are still sitting with their PS4s, that, you know, you might as well give it to them too. Not even just because, you know, they don't have a PS5 right now, but it's just because, like, financially, especially with how much money is probably well, you know what? Sony's probably not losing that much money in their video game division, because, I mean, everybody's just playing games at home. But generally speaking, like, nobody's going to stores right now and buying these games. So you're trying to make as much money as you can as possible by getting to as many customers as you can. But, I mean, down the road, like 2 to 3 years from now, most games are going to be PS5 exclusive now because the PS4 will just be antiquated hardware. You're going to start seeing, like, that steady stream of sports games and, like, really basic third-party AAA games, like, say, a Borderlands 4 or whatever, like that kind of stuff, where it's going to be on most hardware because, again, that they're trying to make as much money as they can. But if we're talking like first-party studio stuff, like whatever, let's say a new Uncharted is coming out, by the time that comes out in 2023, that's a PS5 exclusive. There's no way it does go for PS4. It would make no sense to at that point. But I don't really have like a crazy amount to go deep in on this article. Like, I really could like read the whole thing if I wanted to, but there's not nearly as much to dig into. It really just comes down to the obvious fact that, you know, there's no reason down the line to continue to make games for 2 different generations because it's not technically viable. It really doesn't work out very well because it limits a lot of what the game can be. You know, I'm pretty sure that Cyberpunk wouldn't have been nearly as broken a mess on PS4 if it was never for PS4. If it was for PS5, we wouldn't have that problem. Or if Cyberpunk was supposed to come out a little bit earlier, like I think it was meant to, and it was just for PS4, there wouldn't have been problems because they would have built it specifically for that hardware. But in the end, because it was right around the time of the new generation, they decided, that, okay, well, we need to really ramp this up because people are going to be wanting this to look amazing too, especially on PC where, the tech quality can be even higher. You can just go massively in overdrive for that. So the problem with doing both is that that it's going to be even harder to account for the limited hardware that the previous generation does have. So it's a reality of what the generations are going to be anyway, because since there isn't a lot of consoles at the very beginning for most of the next generations, you're going to have that stretch where probably for about 1 to 2 years, most releases are going to be for both. So it just means that for the first year or so, you're not going to get the full extent of what that hardware can do on the next generation. And we've pretty much known that forever. I've been around at least for sure on the PS3, PS4, and now PS5 launches, and they all happen the same way. They have some pretty cool games that do push the hardware limits past what we currently knew with the previous platform. However, it's nowhere near what it's like when it's done. We really get to find out what a hardware's best settings can be at the tail end of its lifespan, because then developers have worked on several games on that hardware and they know what they're making now. People have found all these little easy tricks that can kind of get around certain things and really push the capabilities as best as they can. But in the first 2 years, they're still trying to play things out. They're still trying to see, okay, well, I wonder if we can get away with this on this hardware. Can it make this benchmark we're trying to set? But until then, it's like any other piece of technology. If it's VR, if it's motion controls, you're in that early stages of just seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And naturally, that means that there are going to be some games out there that just aren't the quality that you're expecting them to be. They're going to be maybe a little bit lesser than you were expecting, but they are higher than the previous generation. Any game that's running on PS5 right now that was specifically a copy for PS5. I'm not talking just playing a PS4 version on PS5, which even then can have some better results because at least the frame rate won't dip as much. But, graphically, yeah, there's going to be a bit of a difference on PS5, but it's not as big as it could be if it was just running on PS5, because then you would know that every asset that they made for that game, every choice they made for that game was designed around that specific set of hardware. And we'll see that as soon as we see that first PlayStation 5 exclusive, and I'm assuming that's going to be Ratchet and Clank. I mean, if we're talking big games, I think Ratchet's supposed to be the first one at this point. So we'll really get a sense of what that hardware is capable of when that game comes out. And further games beyond that, whether that's God of War Ragnarok, because I can't remember or not whether that's going to be a PS4 game as well or not, but definitely further down the line when we see what 2022 has to offer, what 2023 especially has to offer, that's when we'll see just how much more we're going to be able to pull off, because that's when the hardware is going to really get to be shown a lot better, because that game is literally focused on that hardware and that hardware alone. But until then, every game that comes out for both is going to have some sort of quality dip. Maybe not as noticeable as you would expect, but it's just a reality as it is. And unfortunately for the developers, say the Control devs, that's a reality you're going to have to work with anyway. I think we all knew that whenever a new generation starts, if you're in the business, for God's sakes, you should know this. Every time a new console comes out, you have to at least be making for the prior generation for at least the first year or two. I mean, unless you're a first party, if you're a third party developer, you're making for everything because you kind of have to. That's your financial incentive. But if you're a Sony-owned studio, they can decide right then and there that you're going for PS5 only. Because it's their money. That's what's going on. But if you're a third party, you're trying to get as much money as you can. So you have to release on as many platforms as possible. So, I mean, I get it. I get it for the Control devs. Yeah, it probably does really suck making a game for both pieces of hardware, but tough shit. That's the gig right now. You won't have to complain about that anymore in 2 years. It's really that simple.